good afternoon, and thanks for the opportunity to reflect. I think it's challenging a bit because morning seems so far. At least I don't know how you feel, but okay. So in our workshop and the first session, so firstly we heard a few very nice examples from Spain, France, and Italy, Sardinia, on different coordination mechanisms and strategies, which as the whole event started, these are very inspiring because we see that these things are happening in practice in some of the countries. And then also during the discussion, I think some very key aspects and examples came up, which I think are not new, to be honest, in this whole discussion and context. So firstly, the importance of the coordination mechanisms, both horizontally, so for instance, between the ministries, but also vertically, so between the different levels. That was quite, of course, a critical aspect, that we totally need this for the rural areas to be better supported in the future. Then generally more focus on rural, also if we compare to agricultural, sectoral aspects, to really take into account in some countries it's getting more and more importance, and also the innovation topic came up. And then when it came to recommendations, I think it sharpens up a bit. So firstly, I think we really don't know how much funding can be spent on the rural aspects, and of course there are many competing in terms of both sectoral and different priorities of the EU. And this raises risk, of course, that there will be limited funding for rural. And in that sense, some key recommendations, which I think very much resonate with what we try to put in the declaration as well, that firstly, we really need strategies at the EU level along the long-term vision for rural areas, but also at national level. So rural strategy should somehow frame this whole future policy. And then what we put in the declaration, which will be hopefully soon out, that there should be some kind of obligation for a minimum allocation, because if it's fully left, for instance, for member states to regions, then we might end up in a situation where rural development doesn't get sufficient funding. So the combination of the strategy and sufficient allocation of funding, I think some kind of conditionality in these contexts came up as a key topic. And of course, the connection between the different levels, so from national to regional to local, and the crucial role of LEGs or local stakeholders to be continued to be involved in a dialogue, both in the policy design and later. But I have to say, and this is my personal reflection and might not 100% reflect all the discussion, but I was most inspired by the colleague who came from a village, a local community. That's also what I'm usually being coordinator of the Smart Village Network. And I think he was quite vocal. I don't know where he's sitting, from Andalusia, I think. Okay, yeah, here you are. And thanks for the comments, because I think what we hear, and we have to hear, that local communities at the end of the day often don't get access to this funding, and they feel being left alone, period after period. And I think, and that's what we advocate in the Smart Village Network very strongly, that we have to see that. So in such meetings we can talk about nice coordination mechanisms and what we can do to coordinate funds, which is crucial, and good to see these examples. But I think we need to reflect from the perspective of the local level, whether it at the end of the day actually really reached the local level, and how much funding and how it's reaching the very local community level. Because I think there is a huge job to be done there. So I think maybe similar events, and I know the Rural Pact office is doing this, but we need to reflect from that perspective as well on the policies, not just from the national and the EU level, because I think there is a big risk that we are losing sight of the real impact on the ground, where it seems to be still not reaching the ground level. So I think there is really a lot to do in that context, and I think thanks for that comment continuously, and keep pushing for that because that's what we are trying to do, to make those voices heard as well. So that's all from me, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Edina. Okay, Anita, you go ahead. Thank you, and it was, I think, a very nice bridge. I wanted similarly to finish with my subjective views, but I think I need to continue and start with them. As representing rural society, I think it's so crucial that thinking about future, we have not just clear mechanisms and structures on how to coordinate the policies, but clear structures on how we include in all the processes, not just planning, but implementation and monitoring civil society. And that is something that should ensure that those people, I think it was way more than 50% when the long-term vision for rural areas was developed, the data that was reflecting, that feel left behind in European rural areas. And that is something that we need to work on, because I'm the fan of the measuring the happiness, and I think that at the end of the day, that's something that we, as added value, we cannot just stay in Excel and numbers and finances. We need to think about quality of life. So without that feeling of belonging and being heard, I think that's really, really crucial. And one way of doing that is the systematic, structured way of how we involve that. So the coordination between the ministries and the coordination as well on how we include the verticals, so the real rural people, not just in getting the needs. So I was actually a bit surprised that it came quite a lot in our discussion that we still are seen as agriculture field, all of us sitting here in a room and caring about rural areas, that the reflection is that it's agriculture, that we need to still explain and work on that it's rural policy and rural people and employment in rural areas is much more than that. And it comes in our discussion also, how do we define rural? That was also the second part of the day, but in the first part of the day, we talked about that as well. How do we define rural? And there's a first presentation almost at the day OECD, where it was those two beautiful bubbles, right? Where it's the simple way seeing rural urban, and then the actual reality is something that we need to look way forward. And about suggestions for the what a European level should do. It was a really nice reflection on where the power lies. Of course, the Rural Pact, of course, long-term vision of rural areas, and then we need to understand what's actually pulling the strings and how we can make sure that that's going. And then I like the reflection of Polish representative that really clearly made the chain and said, if we don't have coordination, we cannot nicely implement the strategy. So if we don't have strategy, then we don't know what are our priorities. If we don't know what are our priorities, then we don't start with what's most important. So that chain of the questions, I think, brings clear answer. Why do we need to coordinate? And the European level, we are still expecting to make a push to the national level, because we as a civic society from local level and national are trying to do our best and pushing with the resources and capacity we have to do it so. Yes, it was mentioned also separate and more funding for the NGOs. I should say it loud and again, funding for leader, funding for smart villages, integrated territorial instruments and other place-based solutions. We expect that they will be mandatory from the European level, because we as a civic society, we don't feel secured. And I don't talk about my member state. I think in a lot of member states, we don't feel secure that we will have that funding if it won't be mandatory. So this is, when I say crucial times, it really is. And about the strategies, yes, we would be happy to see also some guidance and capacity building for strategies and to build those on existing systems. So that's what some of the things that caught my attention from our working group, but that's just some. And thank you for great discussion in the morning.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Anita. So now your task, Kevin, is formidable, because you were speaking after two strong civil society voices, but I know that actually in Belgium, Flanders, you have an excellent cooperation between the government and the civil society, so you're very well placed.
I was talking with Magda, and since she was the key listener in our working group, she will go first, and I will end, if that's okay.
Yes, sure. Go ahead, Magda.
Good afternoon. In our discussions in the morning, I'm not going to repeat what Edina was saying and my colleague. Sorry. So we had three very interesting examples. One that backs 35 years from Finland. The Finland has now a national rural policy. Belgium, Flanders, that is starting the process now. And a thematic approach linking to water management in Italy, Piedmont. So the discussion did not introduce any fundamentally new information, but rather it reinforces the long-lasting challenges and that the stakeholders have been voicing for many years now. But if you can talk about key and common challenges and without repeating what was said here, I would like to emphasize the misalignment between the CAP and the cohesion policy, and also the processes that sometimes take too long and are influenced many times and dependent of political and programming cycles with negative results at the local basis as well. So we talked about the key ingredients to success, and here I would like to speak a little bit about the political willingness and commitment. I have the opinion that the rural areas are as important as the policy is giving them importance. So the decision making, it's a level that should be capacitated to the importance of the rural areas as well. For instance, we talked about the importance of having regional and national committees dedicated to rural development and to tailor rural policies to reflect the specificities of each region, leveraging the available tools and instruments like ITAs, CLD and leader approach, and also smart villages. That these instruments should be put in place, but when put in place, these strategies should be comprehensive, have clear objectives, and coordination and collaboration should be key aspects in policy delivering. And the long-term planning on these all strategies. So, and capacity building would be very important as well. Specifically, what regards the long-term vision for rural areas, it was a unified message that, yes, it should be reflected in a strategy with clear objectives, funding, monitoring, an action plan. With the potential added value of providing a unified framework from the EU to coordinate rural policy across member states, could stimulate strategic coherence, optimization of resources as well, effective collaboration and access to funding. And one of the most important messages from this morning is that the EU should lead by example, namely with what regards the coordination and collaboration between policies. And foster, of course, multi-level governance, horizontal and vertical, as we talked a little bit earlier. And we talked again about communication as an important aspect, make member states have a more clear vision. What is the long-term vision for rural areas? I think that the long-term vision is not well known at the member states level, and it becomes worse and worse at the regional and then at local level as well. Even between legs that are all involved in the rural development policy, many of them are not familiarized with the long-term vision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Magda. Yes, and now, Kevin, you can compliment from your perspective.
So just what I want to bring to you is the perspective of, as already said, a region which is starting the process of coordinating policies for rural areas, which we're doing in Flanders. So I really enjoyed today's discussions. It gave a lot of interesting ideas to think about, and I think one message one idea I will take home and talk about with my colleagues tomorrow or next week is that 1 + 1 is not 2, but is 3 in respect to rural areas and policy coordination. I will explain what I mean. When we talk about policy coordination, 1 + 1 equals 3, because you need that political willingness, that coordination at high level, engaging all departments, when talking about the European level, all DGs, not only agriculture, regional development, but throughout a whole government approach. But then again, also create enough, and I think my two colleagues here at the right already advocated for that, the local actor engagement, and maybe not bringing them all to the table. For example, when we have 300 municipalities, and it's not as much as Radim's 6,000 municipalities, you cannot bring them to the table all, but important is that there is feedback from what you decide at a higher level, and making giving proof that towards the local level that you have heard their message, and you cannot take everything into account, but give feedback why you didn't take some things on board. 1 + 1 is 3, also because a strategy, a rural vision is more than, in my opinion, it's more than adding up the actions that each policy area is doing already. It's about integrated action that have a real impact on the viability of our rural areas. And then comes in the first step, and I really agree with Edina, the first step is that strategy, that vision creation, and then also the long-term planning, in which funding really has an important place, but also thinking about rural proofing. How can we make policies better for rural areas? So let us together change mathematical law and make 1 + 1 3. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, now I have a challenge for all of you, and I will ask my colleague Patricia actually to start the technology to put this challenge to you. You have heard quite a number of interesting takeaway messages or ideas that might be inspiring, like, I don't know, focus on the local people, as Edina was saying, or 1 + 1 = 3, and so on. There are quite a lot of these already coming up from what the panelists are saying. You may have your own takeaways. Now we want to open that possibility for you, but be careful. Before you start writing your ideas, I just want to give you a few rules about it. One important rule is that this is a different tool from what we were using in the past, which we are unable to continue using because the Slido has simply stopped offering that possibility, but we have changed the software and we can still offer you this, but it's slightly different. One important thing is you can only put one idea. So think carefully when you have put your ideas. Don't think that you will be able to add another one, because you're only able to add one. Am I right, Patricia? You have changed it now, and that's more. Okay, but if it's possible to put more, then that's better. But anyway, don't put too many, because we won't be able to see them all at the same time. And you will be able to vote for the key ideas that you like best at a later stage. So first we put all the ideas in, and I will ask the panelists to contribute their ideas from the second round as well. In the meantime, you will still be able to put your thoughts into the tool, but then we will introduce the system of voting, and you will choose the ones that you like best, and you will be able to vote for them. That will be at the next stage. For the moment, just put your ideas, and we will try to respect them and put them into the final report to the extent that we can, of course. But when you vote, we'll choose, of course, the ones that are most popular. Okay. And of course, yes, the panelists also have a chance to contribute electronically, but of course you have the bigger chance than everybody else to contribute orally by being able to speak. So I would like you then, the four panelists, to go through their reflections on the second part of the day, mainly on the funding monitoring, but of course feel free to add other reflections. And you will get still another very, very, very quick chance after you've seen the results of the vote. I don't know, maybe we go in the same order? Can we move that like that? Okay, so.
So on the monitoring, right?
Yes,
that's our task now.
Mainly the fund monitoring. Yes.
Okay. It's been discussion at different tables, and we only try to capture at the end. So again, I will just try to reflect from my perspective as well. So of course, firstly, the question is like, why do we want to collect data? And I have to say, we heard some very inspiring presentations at the beginning. So I think at this stage in policy making, of course, there are many different reasons for data collection and monitoring, that we want to understand better and want to make sure, again, that rural areas get access to the funding. And I think that was most of the early morning presentations about, that we often don't even understand where the money is going. And when actually we see the picture, we see what I was saying before, or that's what I heard at least, that if we really look at the local level, and I really like this local unit looking at that rather than the bigger regional level, then we get the picture, which is not always showing a very strong support for rural areas in all communities. So I think in this way, that's one of the reasons. But of course, because of the design of the workshop, I think we went quite a lot like how to help beneficiaries to get information, to do the applications, and then to collect data. So these were the three stages. So I want to reflect on those briefly. So in terms of prior information, there was discussion that it's very difficult, especially from the European level. Of course, there is the rural toolkit, but it was said that sometimes, of course, it's not telling enough about national opportunities, regional opportunities, but it's a challenge as well, so it's almost impossible to do. So either there is a need of maybe even an improved version, 2.0, I think it was said. But I think most importantly, increasingly the AI is being used to find information, and I think we shouldn't forget that aspect, at least at the level of initial information finding, because that's becoming more and more efficient. When it comes to application, though, it's a bit different picture, because again, if we come to the fact that rural communities often don't know what applications are out there, then you see that that they need support, not just with information, but actually with capacity. Because to write such an application, especially if we talk about programs under direct management like Horizon, they are totally lost, and it's no surprise. I mean, the language is very difficult, so often the big players get better access to the funding. So it's a critical question where they can get that support from, and an obvious answer is often lags or local actors or regions that know them better. But I think we need different kind of structures, and actually that's what we try to do in the Smart Village Network as well, to help communities to get direct access to funding, not just indirectly as good practices and so on. And when it comes to assessing the project outcomes, I think that's the third aspect we discussed. It's critical, again, I come back to the first point, like to understand firstly where the money goes. It's quite basic, but still, does it go to rural areas? Does it go to rural beneficiaries? The definition of that we discussed is not that obvious, because at the end of the day we are curious about results at the local level, which might be brought by an external stakeholder, we don't know. So what is really rural spending? But if we just take the area approach, the area-based approach, that's quite a critical issue. And of course we need to have nuances like the type of rural area, the local level, as we heard in the morning, is very critical. But that's the basic basic characteristic, and of course there are more complex indicators than that. And on that, the different governance levels have to cooperate. So we need some kind of common approach at the EU level, how you define rural area, and we saw that there are many different approaches in a way in the different DGs even. So we need to harmonize across governance levels, at least at the basic level. And that could better inform, hopefully, future policies. But once again, the emphasis should be on understanding whether money is spent on local rural communities or not. Sorry if it's... Hope it's...
Okay, thank you very much. Anita.
There was an important part that was skipped to reflect on, as between the first and second part, there is for those people that are present, one of the most important parts, which are coffee break and discussions. And just to reflect on 1 + 1 is 3, as we talk about math a bit today. I didn't know we are so ambitious. When we talk about community engagement, we say 1 + 1 is 11. So 1-1. And I think the rural communities and civic society, and we all should be ambitious enough and say that we do need a special rural fund in next period, and it will be much easier to find if it goes to the rural areas and how it goes, and to measure data. So let's change math even more. 1 + 1 is 11, and we use it usually saying if there is community that no one is active and no one is moving, then it's really each individual cannot access a lot. So once someone starts getting first funding, which is what we talked about in second session, if there is someone with the funding, with experience, it's much more likely that the people around, the cooperation partners will get it so on, because they know already someone that can explain and help. And then, yes, it can go even up to 11. But the discussions, I liked and I would like to share the phrase, the smart is romantic. So continuing the love story of the not just smart villages, that was one of the quotes in our groups. In what sense that it's romantic and good vision to invest in developing different smart tools and mechanisms, but we still do need old school face-to-face consultation, help from the real person being there. So that was something that came both analyzing, giving data that we don't know exactly how and what to give, finding the finances and everything. Unfortunately, we cannot just rely on the devices and AI. But the second important thing that came out from the several smaller subgroups, yes, we want more AI. We want that AI helps maybe even to reflect on results, offering something that, knowing what the theme it was, and we don't need to create all those sentences and stories ourselves. And it was a great example, correct me, Marta, if I say wrong, United Nations and World Bank uses it, that for the disadvantaged groups, it's really simple applications, even on a phone, that have no opportunity to write big applications. So for those groups, we could even see some yes, no, simple style, and it could be also integrated with AI in the reporting, data receiving, and everything else. Yes, the why question comes as a first. Why do we need to collect the data? Why do you want to implement, or I want to implement that project and to work on that? Because sometimes if we go through the rural toolkit or anything, we're asked who we are, what's our what kind of legal body am I, and something. We are like already going away from what actually I want to do and why I want to do. So that could be important aspect to use searching. And yes, online, simple language, one-stop shop, that came a lot. And this, what I just mentioned, result-based search, result-based access and discussions. And last two short things, ongoing calls or adapting to the existing changes. The planning period is long. The European programs are quite often clearly set. Beneficiaries should have opportunity to react on the challenges are coming on the local level and get funding for that and be able to see their challenges in that structures when they are searching for what what the opportunities are, and evidence-based financing as one of the simplification possibilities. And last, tasty cherry. Probably those that are in this bubble following have heard already in different events, Campus Rural, at least I have heard it already before, coming from Spain. So the students get opportunity to stay and to go to rural area and invest their knowledge and skills there. So that's something we would see that, yes, it was, I think, tried and piloted somewhere else, but we would like to pilot maybe much more in wider rural areas. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Anita. Then I think Magda, or you want to go, Kevin? No, for a change, less for once. Yes.
To make things difficult. And that's maybe the first message that I take from that second workshop. That is, when looking at the morning and talking about policies, it really comes naturally, and everybody has an opinion. While in the second part, discussions were somewhat more difficult, and question was harder to grasp and to come with good answers. So maybe that's the first takeaway. Yeah, also capacity building, knowledge exchange on monitoring and evaluation. What is monitoring? What is evaluation? And do not, I think that was one of the key messages. Do not mix those two. Then, when talking about a monitoring and evaluation framework, it's important to know why do you need it, as already said. In our group, it was very much linked to what is the expected outcomes of your projects, of your strategy, of your policy, what are key performance indicators, both at local as well as policy level. At policy level, it was said by Ursula, it's about accountability, but also about knowing, do your policies work? But that our discussion in the working group mainly focused on the local level. So what information do they need? And then discussion very much went on about it's rural development is about enhancing well-being at the local level in the rural areas. It's about the correct characteristics and the needs of that local actors, local communities, and what people are missing then in the current monitoring system is that it's mainly about quantitative data, while qualitative analysis is missing. And that was somebody in the group who was saying, but I'm a researcher, and research does have the methodologies, the knowledge to implement that. When coming to the how, the main conclusion for me was it's not about simplification, as we often say, it's about more efficient use of existing data. For example, and I think Anita also said, artificial intelligence, how can those technologies help in extract data and interpret data. A second idea was the harmonizations between the different funds and frameworks on monitoring and evaluation, and maybe even integrate the processes above the different funds. And that maybe links with the idea of one rural development fund in the next period. A last takeaway message, and it links back again to what already was said. It's about a good intervention logic and knowing why you're doing what you do, what you're doing, how you will be doing, and linking the different indicators to that intervention logic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Kevin. And then Magda.
Well, I don't have many more to add. Just saying that I fully agree with the selection of indicators that should be more results-based. When you come to the evaluation, the monitoring system should provide those indicators to develop the evaluations. About the information systems, they should evolve with AI or whatever technology will be needed to do it. As mentioned, there is a lot of information in the application forms. The application forms are very rich in information in data. So there should be some way of realizing what data is useful to monitoring and to evaluation. Because to have robust evaluations, we can't do it without the monitoring data, because evaluators are not extracting the monitoring data. They are going from the monitoring data to evaluation analysis. We talked about also at local level the questions about the social capital, for example, the improvement of governance systems. We mentioned that the evaluation help desk launched a report, guidelines, not a report, guidelines for the evaluation, for example, of the leader added value. So I would say that it's very nice guidelines, but probably too complex to apply in the local context. But it's being done. So the important thing here, I think, it's to begin. And when in the morning we listen about the simplification, and then on the monitoring systems we came up with added indicators that doesn't say much about what is going on in the territories. So not only think about immediate results or realizations or execution, but think about results at a long term as well, and the intangible effects that investments have in rural territories. Much would have to be said, but I will stop here. Thank you, Ursula.
Okay, thank you very much, Magda. Thanks all of you for those two very, very good rounds and rich. And now let's have a look at what you have in the meantime put in the Mentimeter as your takeaway comments, and then we will, I don't know, Patricia, if you can see, these are the different comments. There are 67, so quite a lot. Be careful not to get lost in them. And then let's vote. Choose the ones that you are most happy about, most in agreement with. I think everybody can have 3 votes, but I'm not sure. I think you will see it also on your screen if you can still add some more votes. And then we will have a look in a moment at the results. Yeah, the QR code again. Yes, is it possible? If not, you have the Mentimeter code on the screen. Yeah, but you can. Yeah. So sorry. And on the flip chart there, you can see also the menti.com. Otherwise, go to menti.com and put the code 52 50 81 79. Sorry, 52 50 81 79. If you lost your connection with the Menti. Okay, we have 4 people voted. We want more people to vote. So, and it takes. Well, you need a while to go through 67. When we reach maybe half the number, so maybe when we reach about 30 30 something votes. We will start showing the results. Is it possible to show the results why people are still voting? Patricia, apologies, we are still discovering the tool, so we are not sure that how to, if we show the results, whether this you can continue voting or not. I think normally should be okay. Okay, let's have. At the moment, highest is better coordination is needed, of course, starting from the EU. Okay. Quite popular as well. Direct dedicated funding. Even may say a direct special dedicated fund to rural areas. Yeah. Okay. Bring Rural Pact to national and even regional level. This is what our policy briefing is encouraging. And of course, there has to be also motivation and encouragement from managing authorities, from the civil society to push for that, yes. I wonder if we can see, these are probably the next one. We have turn a rural vision to an EU strategy. Quite a lot of people like that idea, I see. Rural development as an independent, holistic political field. That's to do also with the examples we had in the morning, where in some member states, rural development is a separate ministry with equal weight to agriculture or other sectors. That is probably behind this idea. Rural diversity for sure. I don't know, are people still voting, Patricia? No, they cannot vote once we showed. Okay. Then, yeah, we will just take your votes into account. I don't know if we can go back to the voting process, probably not. But we will improve working on the tool. Interesting, simplify, simplify, simplify. We will have a look and group these ideas that you put, the 67 ideas. We'll try to group them into, because I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of overlap. And we will select quite a few key points that you are making as key takeaways of this audience, of your viewers' audience. But I would still like to give the last chance to our 4 panelists who are still keynote listeners, very, very quickly, maybe in the opposite order for a change. So, I don't know, Magda, if it's okay. You don't have to say anything, but if you still want to say something, it's the last chance, because then I will thank you. So very, very brief last reflections.
Yes, if I had to say anything at this stage and regarding long-term vision for rural areas, would be communication, 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 not only with member states, but all the governance levels in the member states. I think there is a overwhelming lack and overarching lack of information on the long-term vision for rural areas. I could give the example of my country, but it's like in the extreme worst of the applying rural development policy. But for example, the long-term vision it's completely out of the any strategic document in the Ministry of Agriculture. It's not in the website, for example, or any mention to it. And I would like to say that, for example, we in a transnational cooperation project that was running till now, called Our Common Future. There was a survey conducted to the legs across Europe. We received more than 400 answers, and one of the questions was if they were familiar with the long-term vision for rural areas, and only 30% of the legs responded yes. But the positive side is that the following question, they demonstrated the willingness and interest of learning more and applying it with the proper guidance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Magda.
Maybe my last comment is on funding, which is also a red line throughout the day. And mainly what we are seeing in Flanders is that we cannot count on LEADER and the CAP to take on every aspect of rural development, every need for infrastructure and so on. So you have two ways of looking at it. Maybe the best way is a combination. Look at the new multi-annual financial framework and how we can activate beyond the CAP more resources towards rural areas, but also, and that's one of the exercises we will be doing in Flanders with our Rural Pact, is how can we activate funds from other ministries, from other departments, for example, environment, mobility, and so on, to pool finances and bring them to rural areas.
Okay, thank you very much. Anita?
For sure, the final note is it's actually sad to see that it's still so high there that you need to listen to rural people. We've been talking all day and everyone is all the time talking about diverse rural areas, the people that have so different needs, starting from infrastructure, services, everything, and we cannot unify rural areas. We cannot sit in the capitals and say that we know what is needed in all the rural areas without really talking to people. So if it's still a problem or not happening, then that's what we for sure should start and continue on. And I think we need to react nowadays, with all the huge changes and opportunities coming. It's not enough that we stay where we that we keep what we have secure. To keep in the situation we already need to go forward. If we will stay and do what we do now, we will just slide backwards. So I think also the involvement of people, of rural communities, is something that helps us to make those bigger steps faster, and what also is important for all of us, more efficient steps forward. And it includes not keeping the existing structures if those structures are not most effective. At the beginning of the day we heard, let's take the courage and move away from the agriculture if that's what's needed for those countries where it's needed, and respond to the diversity. So let's listen to people and go forward, not just keep the way we are.
Okay, great, thanks.
I could, of course, reflect on that, and I fully agree. I think we should go home again, everyone, like what we can do better at our own level to make this better for the local level people. But maybe as a final word, what I'd like to highlight, maybe you will be happy to hear as well, that the Rural Pact Coordination Group, as you heard at the beginning of the event, has been developing a declaration, a joint declaration. So it's really reflecting a diverse set of point of views on the future of rural development policy, and it was a long consultation process we did to develop that declaration. And scanning through those comments and the most popular ones, I think it's really good that all those are featuring very, very strongly in this declaration, which will be soon out, and very much hope that it will be promoted through the Rural Pact community. So you can talk about the coordination starting from the EU level. Actually, the declaration is quite explicit on that. The more funding, the thinking of potential dedicated funding for rural development, or taking rural proofing much more seriously across the funds, supporting the local level much more. So all these feature very strongly in the declaration. So maybe that's a good closing word, and I think we will support and promote that jointly very soon. So watch out for that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And that was a really great panel. Thank you. Yes, and I invite you to step down, and I will not try to, of course, summarize that, but just maybe one comment, because what has been coming out from your four contributions quite often is, we have already said many of these things before, and it's definitely true. We are repeating them, But again, we are talking about communication, and communication, I'm sure you all have been involved in that. You have to sometimes repeat certain messages before they actually start taking roots and grow. So we are getting at this stage when you are, the amplification of voices is also part of repetition. You have to repeat it so that the wave is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and when finally the wave breaks, it can make a change. So we are sometimes repeating, but we're getting more and more concrete, and hopefully more and more louder and louder with this voice, and hopefully that we're leading to building the policies in the next period. With that, I close that session. Thank you very much all for your contributions, also electronically.